Joining me on the pod this week, as always, Fraser. Fraser, how are you?
Not bad, thank you. Not too bad.
Good stuff. Simon, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. I always had a soft spot for the Sharknado films, Dan.
Well, lucky for you, it's a big one this weekend, comparable this weekend. And making his podcast debut, Tony Esposti. Tony, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem at all. Thank you for joining our panelist pool. As always, our debut, we have to ask a couple of questions, getting to know you. So for you, where does Cardiff Rugby start, your supporting journey?
So I think I had my first season ticket in the Rebel season 98-99, but the first time I probably interacted with any sort of Cardiff rugby in any sort of anger was John Humphreys and Hemi Taylor came to my primary school and did a coaching skills session when I was in year five. So I think that must have been in the build up to the 95 World Cup or somewhere around there, thinking back on times and stuff like that. So that was probably the time in anger. And I've been to some games beforehand. But yeah, first season ticket, Rebel year, 98-99. My dad took me to the first game and the Are You Watching Vernon Pugh ringing around the Almas Park um, towards the end of that game triggered my dad to buy a season ticket the very next day. And then I've been going ever since. I think there was a period where I went to every single home and away European game um, for probably about 3 or 4 years on the bounce, which is probably the reason why I am the size I am.
Well, if Jonathan Humphreys is doing your skills sessions, no wonder you didn't quite make it as a professional. Like, your line out throwing must be all over the shop.
Hemi Taylor taught me some things with that to do with studs, but yeah, that was about it.
And what's been your favourite memory following the Blue and Blacks run?
So I've been lucky enough to see us win the EDF as it was at Toulouse, which was a fantastic performance. I think Simon said that was one of his favorite memories. I was also really lucky enough to be in Toulon when we won the Challenge Cup the first time, and that was incredible. There were not many of us compared to a lot of French people. And I managed to have my photo taken with Daniel Jones and his medal at the end of the game. And then I was in Bilbao before the pod started. We were talking about how to get to Galway, and my trip to Bilbao was Cardiff to Stansted, Stansted to Santander, kipping in someone's Airbnb for the night, jumping on a bus before anyone else had woken up to go to Bilbao to stay in a campsite, and then out to watch the Gloucester game, which was incredible. I remember at halftime thinking, this is only 2 scores, we're still in this, and possibly being the only person who thought that at that point. And then I managed to blag a ticket for the Champions Cup game the day after, and I managed to watch Leinster win, unfortunately, but Racing absolutely battered Sexton the entire game. So that weekend was probably a full standout. Yeah.
And then the quickfire final questions. North or south?
South.
Terrace or stand?
Terrace.
And east or west?
Closest to clubhouse. So I
answer's
stand
east. I
right
know the
on
answer's
halfway.
east.
Yeah, east. So I stand right on halfway, right above the tunnel, and I've stood in that little corner as much as I possibly can do over the years.
Hugging the cameraman who's just above the tunnel.
I chat to the cameraman because there's a panel there to put your pint glasses down, so it's fine.
Good stuff. Right, getting on to the action then. Cardiff fell 2019 at the hands of Benetton on the weekend. We're in it for most of the game, I think, probably beyond what most people thought when the teams came out on Friday. Really should have won it, but a last-minute penalty from Albanoz broke hearts right at the death. There was a couple of responses to the three-word thoughts on after the game. Steve Coombs of this parish says own worst enemies. Ben said coulda, woulda, shoulda. Dylan said sloppy and wasteful, and quite brilliantly, Nathan said, I put out the message, say, asking if she had 3 word thoughts, and started with tough to take. And then Nathan replied, tough to take, which is sort of like quite superbly unimaginative, just replying the same thing, but sums it up quite well. Fraser, coming to you for first, the summary and sort of general thoughts on the game.
It was quite similar to the Lions, I guess, in the sense that it wasn't a very high quality game, or from my perspective, it was quite scrappy, and neither team really took control of the game. It was kind of both teams were fairly poor, but I guess on this occasion we lost right at the death instead of holding out like against the Lions. I think one of the crucial negatives I found was that we were making quite a lot of silly errors in crucial periods of the game. I know, like, for example, there's the yellow card for Donald, and you can kind of, at the end of the first half, you can kind of argue, what was he to do? The guy ran right at him, but that was kind of a silly yellow card, which obviously gave them a penalty in field position, and that was just after Hamerware did that kick. It wasn't much of a kick, but again, just silly little errors. And then obviously in the last 10, we kind of lost a line out, gave away a scrum penalty that eventually resulted in the penalty, and they won it. And then Winnett had that little meltdown where he knocked on and then did the deliberate knock on as well, which is a shame because Winnett had a brilliant game. So I think those are the small errors in really like crucial moments of the game were the thing that really disappointed me. I mean, there were positives. I think the scrum was really good for considering, if I was impressed by that, and I'm barring the penalty at the end. A big shout out to like Reese Litterick. I mean, he's turning into the new Josh McNally, playing every minute, every game. I don't know how sustainable it is, but he was like involved not only in the scrum but in the loose as well throughout the game. Like, I think in the last half of the or last 20 minutes he made a good tackle, resulted in a knock on from Benetton, which would have been nice to result in us winning. But yeah, he was brilliant. Evan Lloyd shut me up. Me talking about he needed to take a moment, chill out, you don't need to play rugby. And then he turns up and he plays incredibly well, and he was looking massive. Like, I don't know if he's bulked up or something, but he looked really big. And I think our attack actually looked pretty poor. That was one thing that I was disappointed in. We didn't really look that sharp in attack, and there was a few moments, like, I mean, exemplified by that drop goal attempt by Sheedy. I know we'll go on to maybe talk about issues with his kicking and that kind of stuff, but I mean, that was a terrible drop goal. But that kind of came out of it. It felt like it wasn't a planned drop goal. It felt like we just like effed up and didn't know what we were doing. So he was just like, all right, I'll do this, see what happens. And that's weird because it doesn't feel like it usually happens. And I think there was another one off the line out where Alan Lawrence just went into contact and immediately got turned over, just like the first phase off a line out. And that's not really, again, where's the planning for that? How did that come about? So I think our attack, and I guess that comes into making those changes that we did, which again we'll touch upon. Were they the reason why we didn't come up, make it over the line? But yeah, I think a disappointing result, and with a stronger back line from the start, maybe we would have seen them off because Benetton really weren't very good. Even with that team, they looked pretty poor all around the pitch. So I think they were there for the taking. So disappointing, really.
I like the idea of Reese Litterick coming off after another 80-minute shift and like texting Kieran Azarati straight, like, if you ever go on holiday again, I will hunt you down and find. Simon, like Fraser mentioned it there, obviously we didn't send as full strength team as was available to Jockey. We spoke on the pod last week about whether it was a game to sort of sit up on or whether we went for it all out. But the likes of Liam Belcher, obviously Azarati was given a week off, Josh McNally, Ray Lilo wasn't available. Ben Thomas was only on the bench. So quite a lot of guys who, under normal circumstances, and as far as we were aware, like we're up for selection, but we're given a week off with games ahead to come. Sort of, I guess you could probably ask every Cardiff supporter and come back with a real mixed bag of this. But is it was Jockey right to rotate with the benefit of hindsight, or is it one that you kind of think if we'd gone full strength, we could have got the win there and really cemented our spot in the playoff race.
Yeah, I mean, what do we know after last week's pod where we all said go full strength and he decided not to. I think to take Fraser's point, considering the side we put out, it's a good result. I'm not pretending that I'm happy about it or, I felt we should have won it, but actually, I can't remember the last time I saw us, put Winnett's yellow card to one side, because that was like 3 minutes left or something like that, wasn't it? It was like, well, it was less than that. But we only conceded 7 points in those 20 minutes. And that was a penalty try, which I've never seen a Cardiff side go down to 14 men and not leak like 21 points. So, to not kind of like put a false positive on it, I was really impressed with that, because I've seen, and it, Benetton, we know, are a physical side. They're direct, they're hard running. I think they will have left that with a huge amount of relief, Benetton, and that shouldn't have been as tight as it was in the end. But I was watching the highlights from last year's game. I still don't know how we lost last year's game based on the highlights, but it was kind of like that. I felt that we were relatively comfortable at points. I think what was really interesting was like Regan Grace getting skinned a couple of times down the wing in terms of just either a handoff or not quite being in the right position for the tackle. Now, I don't know whether that is the lack of game time with him or still a bit of learning, kind of switching codes. He still hasn't played that many games, but I think that, he got beaten on the outside a few times, which you kind of wouldn't expect necessarily from a player of his background. So I think that might just be a bit of rustiness. And the wing he was up against looked good as well. So, as you say, Fraser, there was a few things that were just a bit, like we said last week, frustrating, where we're giving them field position. The scrum that led to their penalty to win it, Alan Lawrence dropping the ball at the back to knock it on when we were in control and we got out of our 22. Those are the type of things we were talking about last week. If we can cut those errors out, we're competitive. But I had a one-word review on the WhatsApp chat afterwards that isn't broadcastable, because it just felt like it was there for us. Now, if we'd picked McNally, Falatau, Lilo, would we have won? You just don't know, do you? I mean, that experience might have made a difference. I don't think the centre partnership was as worrisome as I thought it was going to be before kickoff. I actually thought Jennings probably had one of his best games for us, to be honest. I think it didn't quite fire, but I expected it to struggle a little bit, as Harry doesn't play at 13 that often, but more dummies than I've seen in a Cardiff game all season, in terms of making breaks. So I was probably pretty downbeat on Saturday, because I thought it's the one that got away. But actually, when you look at the performance, you think they're a very good side. They've got quality. We went out there with not our strongest side and should have won it. That's the bottom line. We should have won it. But, as someone said, coulda, shoulda, woulda. You take a point. I think that the only thing I would add is that the results around us didn't go for us. So now we're chasing where, the top 8, rather than being in control of it. So I think if you look at that, it's a big, we'll come on to talk about Connaught. It feels like a big roll of the dice now to kind of go, actually, we target that.
I like lots of dummies as a possible podcast episode title, because it sort of works both ways in terms of how the attack went and also how many errors we made in the second half. Tony, obviously we mentioned the players that were missing there, but it did allow a lot of players to step up. We've mentioned Evan Lloyd at hooker, Ben Donnell slotting into second row, Ellis Bevan coming back in, Millard having a go at 13, Grace on the wing. Kind of a mixed bag from some of those guys, I think. Who sort of stood out for you in that sense?
Simon touched on Jennings probably having his best game of in a Cardiff shirt for a while. Like, it's disappointing that Grace hasn't played as much as I was hoping he would have. And I was really hoping for big things for him. He looks like such a great talent in league, and it just hasn't. He's like been exceptionally unlucky. But Lloyd was Evan Lloyd, like we've bemoaned, or I've bemoaned all season, and the last 3 or 4 about our line out. But I think we won 13 line outs in the end, which is great arrows. I mean, not did he come off for? But
Not until
regardless
very
of if
late,
did,
if he did.
yeah, like it's just such a great turnover, and like we won 11 scrums as well, and to some touched on the fact that Benetton are a very good team. They might not have had their strongest team out looking out for this weekend, but we scored 3 tries compared to their 1, which was, when you think we had 3 yellow cards in that, still not convinced that win it one was a yellow card, because I think there were 2 forward passes before it that should have come back. But we made 150 tackles compared to like their 70 odd, and had surprisingly little possession and territory compared to them. We're turning into a cling on for dear life team and hit teams on the counter sort of like side. So it's, yeah, it feels like one that's got away, but it depends on the result this weekend.
Obviously, it's the same losing bonus point we took from last season. So in terms of sort of direct comparison, we're not really up or down on that. And with this one being away, I think it's probably a slightly better losing bonus point than the one last season at home. Fraser, we mentioned Evan Lloyd a bit there. He did have a cracking game, sort of a couple of really good line breaks, strong over the ball, and good on his line out throwing as well. How does Jockey manage the hooker situation going forward? Because obviously Belcher is captain and borderline undroppable for big games. Evan Daniels looked really good the last few weeks. Evan Lloyd, obviously, similarly to Daniels, breaking out slowly and becoming like a senior member of the first team, as well as juggling being in the Wales squad as well quite a lot over the last 12 months. At some point, particularly Lloyd and Daniel will want to be like starting more often than not. Is it a case of just moving on from rotating them on the bench to rotating all 3 of them as the starter now?
It's a really hard one, actually. I mean, I was debating whether Evan Lloyd should go back to number 8. He's a converted back. Yeah. He's a huge number 8. Why not? We get him in the back row, but then obviously that'd be another problem, which we know the back row is an issue in terms of who you select. I don't know. It's a really tricky one, because even David Hughes, when he's played this season, has looked pretty solid. But when he's come on or when he started, so I'm not sure how you manage that, because someone is going to be disappointed every week, and not like 2 of them aren't even going to be in the squad. And I think Evan Lloyd, if the potential on him is pretty huge. Like, so those 2 tries today, in the second try, with just the power that he showed to keep going, you don't get that with many players. It's kind of like Derry Lake style, a person he's just kind of a freak of nature in terms of his stature and his build, and you can't just find another one of those kinds of players. So I think Evan Lloyd's going to have to, I think it would be Belcher and Lloyd would be the 2 that I would probably focus on getting as much game time, because obviously Belcher's the club captain. He's been amazing for years. He's not that old. He's still got years in him, I think. That's really harsh on Evan Daniel, though, because Evan Daniel, again, he's shown himself to be really good when he's come in and played. But I think I'd probably focus on what Evan Lloyd to get better. He's a special player, or he could be a very special player. So I would focus on him, I think. But I don't know how you do that. It is a tricky question.
Yeah, the sort of unthinkable aspect of it is that on my newfound Dragons former Cardiff team from last week, there is no hooker there. So they're all contracted to next season, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, you sort of maybe for the best rugby, one of them maybe does move on eventually. I'm not sure. I remember Josh Turnbull last summer when he came on the pod, name checking Tom Howe was coming through the academy as well, just to throw another name coming through. I think he's under 17 this year, but he's clearly a massive talent. If anyone's watched him play for Ysgol Glantarfi, he's 17. He looks about 25 already, so he's not going to be too far away from stepping up in the next couple of years, I think. Simon, there was obviously quite a lot of refereeing focus post game. Gareth said yellow, 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 which is also what happens if your Coldplay CD gets stuck in the CD player. And Rob said reputational reffing again. Yeah, Holly Davidson with an unfortunate stat line of, I think it's like 89% home wins in her URC career, which I think Munster are the only team to have won away while she's been refereeing. Not helped by Andrew McNenemy on TMO, who is constantly at the centre of issues with Cardiff. Ulster from last year, he's missed the Sharks' eye gouge. We don't like to talk about refereeing too much on this pod, but I bring it up because Matt Sherratt went as far as somebody who is under a 1-game suspension for comments about referees could go in his post-match comments regarding sort of a lack of 50-50 calls going our way and making it difficult. How much is it that the refereeing isn't great versus how much can Cardiff control on the work that we're doing to analyze referees and looking at trends from individual referees and how we can negate that?
I mean, I think I'm sure that they are doing that analysis of referees before going in, because whoever the referee is in rugby, they are so central to how the game is played. In terms of if you allow a bit of a free for all at the breakdown and you're happy for a contest to happen, you're playing one way if you're more of a kind of referees particularly focused on set piece or what they want to see, and those conversations happen before games. We know that referees go and speak to coaches and captains and go, this is what I expect. So I think there is an element of it feels like we're not adapting in game at times, and sometimes that's just tiredness. When you're making like hundreds of tackles, you're going to land on the wrong side. You're not going to be, you're going to go for something and your timing's going to be slightly off. So I think there is some elements of it that's in our control, not necessarily in the build-up, but also adapting in game. I think there are sides that adapt in game really well to referees, and I think that's where you need some really good leaders on the pitch in the pack, and your captains to be able to have that communication, to find out what isn't quite working. I think that the Donald yellow card, it's one of those where you're like, well, as Fraser said, I don't really know what else he can do. He's within 10, but the player kind of slips into him. It is a high hit. It probably is a yellow card, but it's unfortunate.
Thomas pulls him back as well just before. So off the mark, I can't remember who it was, but he sort of like gets grabbed by the shoulder by Dan Thomas, which then sort of makes Donald sort of stop as well. Like,
yeah,
just.
I think, I think it's one of those that you see and kind of go, well, it's a rugby collision, but it is high. And, from my perspective, I don't want people to be hit in the head, and you kind of go, okay, it's a yellow. So I don't think we're adapting. I think we know that the standard can be a bit iffy at times. I think the scrum penalties were really interesting. There was a couple where it was really clear that I think the Benetton loose head was losing their foot in and going down and under the tight head, and we got penalties at that point. The last one, for the life of me, looked like lots of the other ones that we got a penalty, but they got a penalty at that point. So I'm no expert at all on scrums, but that was really frustrating because I think we had a little bit of the upper hand at that point at scrum time, and I don't think we would have collapsed it. There was a few where Cardiff rugby on Cardiff scrum on skates was very much in full effect. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those, as you say, Dan, you don't want to talk about the referee too much. It's up to the players to adapt to how the referees interpreting the game. That's always been the way in rugby. I think referees are becoming more central to how the game is played. But we've got to adapt to that. The only other thing I'd add is just looking at the results from last season, it feels like we're in games more realistically than we were last season. It feels like we were picking up bonus points or losing bonus points, but that was because we were chasing the game when we were like 30 odd points down and, being brave. Whereas if there is progression this season, it feels like we're closer to closing those games out than we were last season, where we felt a long way from, we were brave losers last season. I'm going to say this season we're just losers, but you know what I mean? That we are getting closer. And I think if we can add some of that, kind of smarts into it of playing the referee, understanding what the referee wants, and just being a little bit. And it might be a lack of experience. You've still got some quite young players around there, and the leadership group isn't, certainly on Saturday, wasn't, full of experience. So, you can only say learning so often, but I think they'll probably go away and look at that. And yeah, the 50-50s don't go for us, but the 50-50s tend not to go for the away team. And that's what home advantage is about, isn't it? But yeah.
I think I was looking for when we might have Holly Davidson at home, and obviously the only home game left is Munster. So that's probably not a great sign if she rocked up to that and then Munster probably end up winning that anyway, to be honest.
But sorry, Dan, on that, I'd be really interested to know if the club and the other Welsh teams, when they're having these joint sessions, are they having referees in to talk them through what's going on as well? I'm sure I read something when England were up high, they were regularly having referees into their camp. Same with Wales, to help them work out what they could and couldn't get away with the URC and the CVC stuff. Surely there has to be an opportunity to try and get some of these refs that don't like us, quote unquote, into training and just try and see what they do and don't like, or even just recently retired refs. So, yeah.
The problem is they're getting Welsh refs in who don't give us any help at all.
Well,
that's the issue. Although obviously, if we were it's lucky we're not a Scarlets or an Ospreys pod, because then I think it would be a full refereeing pod after the absolute shambles that Griffin Colby produced in their derby on the weekend. But anyway, moving on. The other sort of big outcome, Tony, from feedback from the weekend was around kicking, and obviously, Jared, you call him Jared Evans, and Callum Sheedy missed the conversion late on, which, his kicking percentage has been incredibly low all season. There has been a lot of tough ones. This one, a lot more straightforward. I think it is slightly unfair to say that the game obviously hinged on that. There was a good 10 minutes left where a lot happened after that try, but obviously played into it a lot. Sam on Facebook, who listens all the way from the US. He lived in Cardiff for uni. Never misses a game. So I dread to think what time you're getting up for some of these to watch us lose these. But fair play to you for your commitment. He says Benetton was a disappointing result, but I think if we were told we'd leave with a losing bonus point before the game, we would have taken that. I was interested to hear the thoughts on Sheedy's recent dip in form, especially his kicking, which really cost us. I still believe Sheedy should be our 10 moving forwards, but it's concerning going into a tough run of games now. I'm not sure I necessarily agree that it is a dip in form, but it's got to be Ben Thomas time, kicking wise now, hasn't it?
Yeah, Sheedy's kicking has been consistent throughout the whole season. It's it's been there rather than there. And I don't think he's I think at one point at Bristol he was an 80% kicker, but outside of that, little peak, I'd be interested to know the stats on where his kicks were as well for that 80%, because maybe he was a bit put off by the fact he had one pretty much right in front of the posts, and that's why he missed the one on the weekend. I think there's obviously lots of calls for us to play De Beer, but there are moments in games, and I think back to there was a game a couple of weeks ago, and I think Millard broke through. It was either Millard or Cam Winnett broke through, and it was off a lovely little delayed pass from Sheedy. And you just you wouldn't get that from De Beer. Sheedy is from a technical level, miles better than the next one down. His floor is so much higher than what De Beer is going to give you. You're right. It's everything else. It's the kicking around that, and why we don't use the international kicker we've got stood inside Sheedy more often is perplexing at times. Even Cam Winnett, I'd be interested to see what his kicking to touch would be compared to Sheedy. You misspoke and called him Jared Evans at the start, and I think we've had lots of conversations over the years about how Jared Evans was is a remarkable 10 in a similar mold. He can do fantastic things on the pitch, but I always worry about, especially as a Cardiff team who makes 150 tackles per game and is pinned in their 22, when you win a turnover, it must be so demoralizing for Tom Young or whatever, puts his head in a ruck, wins the ball gets turned over, you kick the ball, you look up and it's gone just outside the 22, and immediately you're back defended again. Like, yeah, it's an interesting one. It's certainly something they need to look at moving forward of what they do from a kicking perspective, and it has to be Thomas, really. It has to be.
I think as well, we've left so many points out.
Yeah.
There are games that are tight games. Connaught at home, we left points out on the pitch that just gets our nose in front. And I feel like if we get our nose in front this season, we can close games out. We don't always, as the weekend shows, but we can. That kick at the weekend would have made, they had to score a try, that they were really huffing and puffing. That where they did make line breaks, they were like around the halfway, out wide. We scrambled well. They knocked on or turned over. Dan got the weather forecast wrong, and it wasn't dry. It was one of those wet nights, but out there. So, in those tight games, you need somebody to land the goals, and I think this season it has cost us. But I agree with you, Tony. I don't, and Dan, I don't think I think he's getting better in his game management for us. The kicking to touch and the goal kicking is just letting down. But then again, against the Lions, he nailed that one from the touch line.
Yeah.
So you just sit there and go, oh, he hasn't got the legs for this, and then bang, over it goes, and you're like, I don't, I think it's up to him though. With a goal kicker, I always, that 2005 Grand Slam where Stephen Jones gave it to Gavin Henson, it was just like, I can't kick this. This is too far. Off you go. You have a go at it, and I think it needs almost that level of acceptance. Not the right word. He's an international class rugby player. He knows what he can do and he can't. But it feels like the coaching staff maybe are reluctant to take it off him because what it would do to confidence and things like that, rather than him turning around and going, actually, Ben, I'm missing these. These are important points. You have a crack at it. Ben Thomas has missed kicks, but he just seems a bit more. It just seems a bit smoother,
resilient.
Yeah, he seems a bit more smooth on his. But we've left too many points out there, so that
Yeah,
I think I agree.
It doesn't seem very. I don't know. It always looks like it's curving away. It just doesn't seem very controlled in terms of the way he kicks the ball. And I think, like you said, it's up to him to say, right, today's not my day. Because like some of the kicks aren't necessarily really difficult. They're not like Stephen Jones giving it to Henson where it's like, I can't kick that, it's fucking miles away. It's that they should be kicks that Sheedy's getting, but you're not going to hold it. It's difficult to hold your hand up and say, this is pretty easy kick, but I'm actually really rubbish today. So can you?
Yeah, it is. It's really hard.
Yeah,
I'm not a kick watcher, and I haven't watched a Cardiff kicker since Neil Jenkins. I actively turn around and face the other way. But so that gives a really interesting perspective on people's kicking. Like when Sheedy kicks the ball, it sounds like he's kicking a flat ball, where you listen to other people kick a ball and it just sounds nice off the tee, and you can then the roar happens afterwards, hopefully. But like close your eyes when he next kicks a ball off a tee, and you'll understand what I mean. It just sounds like the ball's flat, which comes on to like the point you were making. It just doesn't sound like his technique, his timing is right, and that's why he's shanking stuff. I say as a 150 kg man who has very rarely kicked a ball in his life.
And Tony turnaround also allows a good fun of games where you can sort of fake a reaction to how it's gone, and he has no idea if the ball's gone over or not then. So,
my mum's got no poker face. I can always tell.
Unless anyone's got anything else burning to say about Saturday's game, we shall move on to the news section. Bit of injury updates slowly coming through as I don't know, the club tend not to put too much out at the end of the season. I think try and guard a bit of team selection, but Found out over the weekend that Reece Barrett dislocated his knee when he went off against Leinster last month, which is a shame as he was looking very good in the first team. It's likely him done for the season, but doesn't sound like any ACL damage there. So hopefully he'll be back in for pre-season and ready to hit the ground running next year. And then the club put out a short video today that showed Josh Adams back up and running in training, which is positive. Not like fully involved, looked like he was doing his own sort of thing. So I suspect unlikely he'll be available for the weekend, but means that hopefully we'll see him before the end of the season, and he might still have a bit of an outside shot at Lions selection there as well as an experienced guy, but maybe that's just me hoping. Other pieces of news, the Cardiff Rugby announced that the Matrix High Performance Gym has been launched at the Arms Park. It's properly a full-time setup down there now after they've moved everything back from Pentwyn. Looks very good. Hopefully that helps out some of the young lads coming through in particular. I think it'd be good for the pathway and the rags. And the other one was the Cardiff Rugby Museum are looking for new volunteers. So if you're involved in want to be involved in that, then the information's on the club website. And finally, there was some sad news this week. Kenneth Williams passed away at the age of 86. Kenneth played 115 times for the club between 1956 and 63 at centre, scoring 20 tries before heading north and signing for St Helens, where he played for a further 6 years before retiring. He was one of the famous 8 Williams brothers from Taff's Well, including his brothers Blethyn and Lloyd, who both captained Wales, the others being Gwyn, Brinley, Vaughan, Elwyn and Tony. He was the last surviving of those brothers. That's sad news and thoughts with his friends and family. Kenneth Williams, who passed away at aged 86 a few weeks ago. At this point of the pod, then, we'll say if you are enjoying what you're listening to or watching, please feel free to like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on, or if you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Always plenty of podcasts going out. The SRC pod, one of those back up and running. Hopefully they'll be talking plenty about our next section, Rags Corner, as Cardiff RFC stormed back to the top of Super Rugby Cymru after Ebbw Vale had slightly jumped us with their early game in the week on television. Cardiff beat Aberafon 22-44 at the Talbot Athletic Ground on the weekend. Tries from Alan Rees, Joe Williams, 2 for Joe Goodchild, 2 for Matty Young, and a penalty try from an absolute monstrous scrum, which have a look on the highlights at them walking Aberafon back. Aberafon's match report called it a harsh penalty due to an inconclusive scrum. Their pack ended up behind the dead ball line. Like, that's how dominant this scrum was. They were off. I think they were in the second lane of the M4 by the time that they eventually stopped matching them back. Cardiff now go into this weekend a game away at Bridgend. Tony, you are the world's only Cardiff and Bridgend season ticket holder. It is a derby in your household. What are you expecting from the game this weekend, and how much is it important to get that bragging rights for you?
It's massively important. So I've deliberately sat by here, so you might be able to see behind. There's a shirts on the wall. So that was my wedding book. It's a half Cardiff shirt and half Bridgend shirt, both of them, and then signed during the wedding thing because my wife is from Bridgend. So having those bragging rights is fantastic. I've managed to steer my eldest boy towards Cardiff. He has his first season ticket as of next year. So the two of us will be the only Bridgend Cardiff crossover people. Yeah, it's a funny place to go because there's a lot of ex-Cardiff lads in there. Like I mainly have a season ticket so I get to watch Ed Howley still because like I miss that man playing for Cardiff. They're a strange team, Bridgend. They've sort of turned it around since Christmas. Their performances belie their results. But I feel Cardiff will be going there to right the wrong of the last result, which was in the cup, and we sort of took a weakened team and just missed out on a result. But I feel Cardiff will be going to try and right that wrong. I think we're guaranteed a home quarter final now based off the results as they are. But 75 points, so we're 7 away from that, will guarantee us to be at home the whole way through if we were to get through that quarter final as well. So it's a really important running because I think I listened to you guys and maybe the SRC pod at the beginning, and they were all predicting us to have a bit of a languid season with how the teams were and obviously with the call ups the first tab. Like so to be in this position coming into the last few games is a big talk. So and it sounds like Mackenzie Martin's going really well, Dom. Last 2 games he's played in the second row. He apparently carried really well against Aberravon. So
It's from the highlights as well. Matty Young still seems to be getting better and better at full back. He's somebody who could certainly come into first team contention next year. And
fits into your ginger agenda that as well.
who's that?
Matty Young.
Is he ginger? I don't
think
know.
so.
We'll have to get a
Looks it.
ginger club ruling on that, whether he's allowed in or not. I'll report back. And then Harry Wild looked really good as well. His passing range is unbelievable. I think it's for Young's first try where he just from nothing, from just a standing start, whips the ball about 20 meters out to the right wing and allows Young to go over. So the Rags away at Bridgend this weekend, 2:30 on Saturday. If you want to get down there, and then you can get back to the clubhouse before the evening. The only other piece of pathway news. Wales under-18s have been playing some warm-up games for their under-18 Six Nations Festival campaign coming up. It's been a whole host of Cardiff involvement in that. Dylan Barrett, Tom Howe, who mentioned earlier, Alfie Prigodzic, Rhys Cummins, Vinay Cleek, Gabe Williams, Lloyd Lucas, Ben Coomer, Bailey Cutts have all been playing, and Josh Turnbull on the coaching staff there as well. I think they've won both of their warm-up games so far going into the festival, which I believe is going to be in northern France somewhere around the Easter holidays time. Finally, then, in the last section of the podcast, we come on to Saturday's big game. Cardiff travel to Connacht once again, this time in the European Challenge Cup round of 16. 8 o'clock kickoff on Saturday night at the Sports Ground, live on Premier Sports for those of us in the UK. I can offer you a live weather forecast, which will have no reflection on what the weather will actually be on the night. But it says at the moment that it's 11 degrees sunny and only 14-mile-an-hour winds, which I think on the Galway tax is actually 140-mile-an-hour winds when kickoff comes round. Fraser, coming to you, I suppose the big question ahead of this weekend is, having rested and rotated some of our senior guys out last week, presumably with the intention of bringing them back in this week, have we inadvertently massively ramped up the pressure on ourselves sort of internally to win this one?
I don't know. Obviously, it would have been better to win, but I don't feel that we're going to be like. I guess it was like a team decision to go into that game against Benetton and kind of all accept that they might lose it. It didn't. I don't think they'd clearly not gone into that with the idea that we've got to win this and build on it against Connacht. So I know it does ramp up the pressure in a way, in the sense that obviously, it's trickier now to get into playoffs. Obviously we've still got a chance, but it makes it a little bit tricky having lost that. But I think we still should go into this with confidence. Like Simon was saying earlier, like we came very close to beating a good Benetton. Well, they're not a great Benetton side, but on paper they look pretty good. And we had a lot of changes, so that is positive in that sense. And I think Connacht have lost the last 2 games. Obviously, that mad game against Ospreys, and I think they lost against Munster at home on Saturday. So they're not going in with good form. I think surely eventually we'll beat them again. Yeah, if we keep playing them in this weird alternate universe, then yeah, I have faith, and I think we can definitely do it. We've come close twice this season, and you could argue, yeah, at home we should have won that definitely. And I believe the team would think that they can do it as well. I don't think it's beyond them, and I think as much as it's a shame to lose to Benetton, I don't think that would have affected the morale massively. I feel like we'll go into Saturday believing that we can do it, and I'm fairly confident that we can do it.
Simon, I put on our running order some questions to consider. That is Connacht now more of a rivalry game than the Dragons, because obviously we just sort of beat the Dragons all the time and we play Connacht all the time, but we also lose to Connacht quite a lot. So in a sort of Mitchell and Webb look style, are we the Dragons in this relationship?
It's more annoying than playing the Dragons. I'll put it that way. Yeah, it's one of those where you feel that the two clubs are evenly matched, but they get across the line. I think their home ground is a a bit of a fortress for them because of the way it's constructed, the weather conditions there. That is kind of when sometimes when you say home advantage, you do kind of go, oh really? Does it make that much of a difference? But yeah, in Galway, I think it makes a massive difference. And as I've said for weeks, we always seem surprised that there's weather there. We always go there and it's like, oh, there's weather. How did that happen? So maybe getting a meteorologist on the backroom staff for the next few weeks might not be so bad a thing. It's knockout rugby, so there's always pressure. There was going to be pressure whether we won in Italy this weekend or not. So I think we've just got to. This is really obvious. You've just got to play the conditions sensibly. I don't think we probably did that when we played them out there earlier this season. Second half, they know how to play those conditions a bit better because they're more used to it. But second half, we got on top of them. I think they got a try, didn't they, from a line out, from a kick to the corner, and that was their scoring for the second half to kind of put them away, put them out of reach for us. So, do I think they're beatable? Yes. Do I think the home advantage is significant? I think we're going to have to keep Bundyaki quiet, which is is no mean feat. He turned that Ireland Wales game when he came on. If you can't, and particularly if they are playing into the wind during the game, they can just give him the ball and get over the gain line and get around him. So yeah, it's going to be tough because it always is against them. I think they lose to Munster. Did Munster have like a player sent off or something at the weekend? So they'll be smarting from that as well, because losing to Munster is one thing. Losing to Munster when they've had a player sent off as well probably isn't put everyone in the greatest frame of mind there. So they'll want to come out and prove something. They've been great in the qualifying. They've pretty much got through the qualifying phase of this competition like in second gear. It seems like they've gone through with plenty to spare. They're the number one seed, so it's not going to be easy. But do I think we can do it? Yeah, but it comes back to what we said last week, what Fraser said earlier. If we make silly mistakes, if we give them field position through penalties or knock-ons or all that kind of stuff, we will lose, because you just can't do that against Irish sides in general. But in Galway, it could be a long evening, late kickoff as well. So I hope we can do it. I wouldn't be surprised if we do, but it's a tough ask. It's one of the toughest places to go, I think, that we could have had.
So Connacht,
do you think French refs help us? So it's an all French refereeing panel, and including TMO, and I wonder whether that sort of plays to our advantages. So it's the same ref from the Wales Fiji game, and I sort of remember him having a decent game, but he allowed a lot on the floor. So I wonder whether that's an area that we can target, like to try and get at them, which is one of our strengths. It's just something that stood out to me, because obviously when we normally go to Connacht, you've got two Irish touch judges and whoever else, but it's just something that stood out to me, that maybe this is a better shape because we play in a sort of way that they will like.
Yeah, and I think if you're playing into that wind and there's a contest allowed on the floor, we've got the players to turn ball over. If it's a little bit loose there and anything goes, and so yeah, you might well be right there, Tony. As we just discussed, you've got to adapt to the referee. And this won't be a referee that we'll be particularly familiar with, possibly. So yeah.
Also, if there's lots of wind and when it can start running, I'm sure there's some sort of pun that Dan can put together to do with wind and win it. So
I'll put my, that could be a podcast title for next week. I'll think about that all week now. So hopefully that's a great game. Connacht, as you said, after the international break, have come back, losing to the Ospreys and then lost to Munster On the weekend, Munster had 14 men for a good hour and 13 men for a period of the second half. They took that game to Mayo to play in the GAA stadium there, and watching the game back, it was still windy. Like, is it just windy everywhere? Cannot go? Do they just take the wind everywhere? I don't
What
know.
a wind machine.
But they put out their full team, obviously, for an Interpro game. So there was Aki, there was Mac Hansen at fullback, Finlay Beelum at tight head. Cian Prendergast, their captain and another Irish squad member, also played. He was unfortunately the player on the receiving end of the red card. High shot ended up in hospital. Reliably informed that he's been discharged and is okay, but is not going to be available for this weekend after that as he goes through the concussion protocols. Tony, obviously we have to play the conditions a little bit, but where do Cardiff need to improve to win this weekend?
Be a bit smarter, like we've talked about all the way through. Present good images when we're trying to go for those turnovers. Yeah, if the wind, like looking at the wind, like you were saying earlier, if it's anything like that, it's going to be very similar to the last game we played against them, where you can only really kick in one half, or one direction, and presenting good images early can hopefully pay dividends at the end of the game, so we're not getting scrum penalties given against us at the end when we're winning that scrum. And yeah,
It's interesting watching that game back on the weekend. And a lot of talk from Connacht fans and the media around them afterwards. Their fly half Josh Ioane, who's relatively new, I think, to Connacht, had a very poor kicking performance on the weekend. Which, I mean, usually we go over there and Jack Carty sort of battered us all around the corners of the sports ground because he knew exactly the direction of the wind from different parts of the pitch, but be quite good to get some pressure on him, I think, early doors, because there was a lot of noise around him and the backup 10 of JJ Hanrahan, who is still going. He signed for Munster next year. I'm sure he played for the Dragons about 25 years ago now, so I don't know how old he actually is, but he seems to be going around forever. Getting into the Cardiff team then, no real new injury news, nothing major came out of last weekend. Still going to keep Josh Adams ruled out. We still got likes of Reece Barrett, Ed Byrne, Mason Grady, Jacob Beetham sidelined, obviously Cabango and Ewan Stevens on the long-term list. Ali Davis, who looked like he was taking full part in training last week, but obviously didn't even go to Treviso because he was on S4C's coverage in Cardiff. So not sure if he's 100% back yet or not. We'll wait to see on him. But if as I go down team selection wise, there's not a huge amount to actually debate. I think a lot of the positions do pick themselves. I wanted to start Fraser with the front row, though. I think the sort of the names in it are fairly set of Domachowski and Southworth at loose head, Azarati being back available with Litterick at tight head. And then I suspect Belcher and Lloyd stay as the hookers there. I can't imagine Lloyd drops out after his performance last week. And so the question is sort of who starts and who benches in that scenario. Is there any strong feelings on that front?
I think probably Belcher needs to come back in just for that. We were talking about leadership, and I think Teddy Williams was obviously captain, I think, last in the game against Benetton. I think he's still developing into that role, so it'd be good to have Belcher, who's been there a while. He's a quality player. Obviously, yeah, Evan Lloyd on the bench for that impact. He'll bring a big impact off the bench, which is good. I think probably, I mean, depending on if Reece Litterick ever arrives in the red zone, I'd probably give him another start because he's done really well and the scrum went well. And then you've got Kieran Azarati to come off the bench like he did a couple of weeks ago and like solidify things if they are getting a bit dicey. And then it's a toss up between Domachowski and Southworth. I'd probably maybe go for Domachowski. He's had 2 weeks on the bench, so give him a start. But again, it's horses for courses. I don't really have any particular preference in that case. Yeah, I think that would be my selection in the front row.
It's encouraging that we're sort of developing quite good options there, really. We're sort of a very mini version of the bomb squad, a squad bomb, as it might be for us.
I think I'd be interested. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I'd be interested to see Domachowski, Lloyd, and Azarati coming on together, because you bring them. And we talked a couple of weeks about what's Jockey learned from his time at Wales, and we all talked about making substitutions. He sometimes leaves it too late, and I thought he made the substitution at the right time. On Saturday, he brought fresh legs on quite early. I think 50 minutes, 55 minutes. There was quite a few changes, freshening up the front row, and you could see us starting with last week's 2 props and Belcher, and then 50 minutes, 55 minutes, if we're still in that game, bringing on those 3 physically big, good scrummagers and really going at their scrum. Because I don't think they've got the strongest scrum in the world. I don't know, but I don't get they're not a side where I think, they're just going to, we're really going to struggle here. But I think if you can keep in it for 50 minutes and say you're playing with the wind second half, that you then turn the screw on their set piece, I think there's something quite interesting there about having those 3 together as kind of a bigger scrummage in front row. Belcher's a good scrummager, but he's not physically imposing around that.
That sounds fair enough to me. Unless anyone's got any strong counter views on that. No, that sounds good. I do think Danny Southworth has quietly been pretty good over the last few weeks as well. He's become quite a shrewd sign. He's still only 25 as well, so he's got somewhere to go over the next few years, and Welsh qualified. So I think that's a big tick in the recruitment box from last summer. Second row then is Teddy McNally. I won't hear anything different. And Tony, the back row then. We assume that Faletau does come back into contention this week. He seemed to be running and training last week and was presumably just being managed on the weekend. I guess the sort of all sorts of options you could go with in the back row here. Is there any 1 or 2 players in particular you'd desperately like to see start?
No, you're right about Faletau coming in. These are the games that we signed in for 3 years ago, wasn't it? To get us over the line, especially in hard conditions like that. It might seem a bit harsh on Ben Donald, but I'd like to start with Alex Mann and Tom Young, but or maybe both them and Young, but and Donald's gone all right in the last couple of weeks, but I just want to go. I want to have that sort of back row early, proper experienced, hard-nosed back row that can get at them. So.
Seems fair. I did think about Donald as well. The yellow was, that he took on the weekend was a little bit harsh, but he'd given away sort of 1 or 2 penalties before that. I mean, we can't afford to be giving cheap penalties away on the weekend. Anyone the Botham question? It continues to be an interesting one, really. Of sort of how do we get the best out of Botham? Does he start at 6? Do we bring him on with sort of same with the replacement front rows and have that huge impact? I don't know if anyone's got any sort of strong views on that at all.
It's strange. It's almost like you want to know which way you're kicking
to
kick off, and then you kind of think, okay, do we pack a physical bench that can really kind of wrestle it in that last, that last 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so, because players will have tackled themselves to a standstill because they're playing into the wind. They're, dealing with lots of mauls, and the Connacht are very good at, as you say, about getting around the park and getting into field position, and we're pretty good at giving opposition field position. So I mean, I think Botham's a fantastic player. I think whatever he adds something to that back row. It's one of those that he always gives a 7, 8 out of 10 in terms of effort. I don't think he gives away that many penalties either. So I'm a big fan. I think he's great. I'm a fan of Donald as well. I think he's been a great signing, to be honest. I think his versatility really helps us to play the game we want to. So it's almost like last week, whoever you put on will do the job. But I think it will be interesting just to see where Jockey's thinking's at, because Dan Thomas only played 55 minutes, didn't he? He came off early, so there was obviously a decision to actually make that change of almost a change of style, because you're bringing on a very different player. So you could see the same thing, but we're blessed in that back row, because whoever gets missed out you could easily make a case for them playing.
Yeah, I do feel this is a Thomas Young game as well on Connacht's new plastic pitch. It just feels like that pace and stuff is desperately what we need. And as much as players moving on and you want to try and build for next season, yeah, these are the games where you just put the best players on the pitch. So I'm happy to go with Young there, and then I think we'll leave Mann. I think I'm happy with Mann starting and both of them off the bench. Then I think there's a bit of experience there as well, which is helpful in the latter stages. Fraser, scrum half. Thought Ellis Bevan was really good last week, having basically hardly played since early January as well. Is it as simple as Mulder just comes back in for you, or is there a consideration there?
I think Ellis Bevan's kicking was pretty good actually. The judgment of distance, it was landing in the right places. I think his kicking game was impressive. And I guess again we're considering the wind. It's like talking about like Bolivian football. You go into like the highest altitudes, so you got to adapt massively. And I think maybe we go for Ellis Bevan because if his kicking game was that good and he can continue that, he'll maybe be able to adapt to the wind being an issue and put a little less on it or a bit lower and maybe he has a bit more range in terms of kicking than Mulder. And then again, bring Mulder off the bench for physical impact and a bit more dynamism. So yeah, I think Ellis Bevan doesn't really do that a lot of sniping, but I think he controls the game quite well. So maybe give Bevan a nod just for that extra skill in kicking from in general.
Sounds solid enough to me. And then so the rest of the back line largely picks itself. I think obviously Ben Thomas comes back in to start at 12. Lilo comes back in at 13. Winnett remains at full back, and then with presumably Adams not being quite available, I think we just moved Millard back to the left wing with Hamer Webb on the other side. Thought Hamer Webb went all right, to be fair, on the weekend. A couple of nice moments, but that seems fairly settled. The question then, Tony, I think is it continuation with the 6-2 bench?
I don't think Cardiff can do anything but 6-2 really, especially with the amount of tackles that we're getting through. We need 6 forwards coming off the bench to try and close games out. Touching on the point Simon made earlier around the front row, having them as groups, so much like South Africa do, bringing them on as a group will only help both of those groups get better as they learn from each other. Yeah, I can't see anything but a 6-2 really.
Simon, we've got Lloyd, Southworth, and Azarati as your replacement front row. The sort of the 3 loose forwards then, or 3 back 5 forwards. We got both of them in there, and then the sort of the same question as last week around second row cover. Is it Donnell or is it Seb Davis as your second row cover, and who from the remaining back rowers then of the likes of Dan Thomas, Alan Lawrence, and Donnell in that one as well? Who do you join with both of them on the bench as the back row cover?
Yeah, I've got a feeling that Alan Lawrence will be on the bench if Faletau's playing, just because I think you still need that size. And Alan Lawrence has done stints in the second row as well. Not his position, but I'm pretty sure he's come on in that position and he can play a 6 as well. So I think you'll have him there because he's earned it as well. The mistake on last Saturday was pretty uncharacteristic, really. He probably didn't have his greatest game for us, but it's solid enough. And then I think it's almost like you put the rest in a tombola, roll it around, and see who comes out. I think Donald's versatility, but Thornton was on the bench last week. In terms of if we're going to, just securing line out ball in. What could be it's going to be dead calm now, isn't it? On Saturday, we talked more about the weather than we have about rugby today. But so I think probably Donnell, but I do think Thornton brings something to games like this. I think this is feels like the final stages maybe of his career. But if you just need to secure ball and drive off it, which is possible, and add some ballast to the scrum to really go for it. It feels like we just pick the biggest players on the bench, bring them on, and just look to physically challenge them at set piece. I do worry about the centres and how influential Aki is, being drawn into that position where we focus on him, and he's got great set of hands that he can just offload and bring others in. So you need to be that. And as you're saying about Hamer Webb, Dan, I do feel for him because he does so much work, but the tries are always come on the other wing. But he is, he chases ball. He secured quite a bit of ball yesterday on Saturday, but he doesn't get those kind of run-ins that whoever is on the other wing usually gets. He's just an incredibly hard-working winger, and I just feel for him some days. I'm just like that. You're never at the end of that pass that just kind of allows you to canter over the line. It's always on the left-hand side.
I was talking about him to someone on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and basically similar conversation of he's a 6 or 7 out of 10 player every single week. Maybe he'll go up to an 8, but he doesn't often drop below that 6. And so you know exactly what you're getting, and he liked it. And ever since then, I've worried that he thinks I was insulting him, but in actual fact, I'd rather 12 players who are always 6 or 7s, and then a couple that can go either side of like up and down, and because you always know what you're going to get. Like you can build off that consistency. Like I really like Gabe. He's grown on me.
With the box kicking, 9 times out of 10 he gets there. And gets up to challenge the ball, which is kind of what you want. And it's obviously just the role for that winger in the system is to do that harder chasing. It always seems to be that wing. It always seems to be coming this way to do that. And I'm sure as a winger he wants to be scoring tries, and that try scored against Bath last season when he was he newly started and he kind of barged his way over. He's got it in his locker to do it. I'd love to see him go over and score a few in the coming weeks, because I think he works so hard for the team, and it's pretty selfless stuff what he does. I think it'll be interesting when Adams comes back, whether he, Hamer Webb steps out and Adams is usually the kind of seen as the more physical winger, and then you have a Ewan Stevens or a Millard or a Tom Bowen on the other wing. But yeah, just give him his flowers, as they say. He's worked hard.
He could have scored on Saturday when Dan Thomas goes through and he does that stupid kick, but Hamer Webb was on his right shoulder, and I'd love him just be sort of NFL style mic'd up at that moment where he's just screaming Dan Thomas's name constantly, shouting right shoulder, but Dan Thomas can't hear him or something.
Because that leads to Ben Donald's yellow as well.
Yeah. If he just dropped it off to the right hand side with Hamer Webb flying through, it's a try versus going down to 10 for that long. Bringing it all the way back to the bench, I'm gonna go for Thornton as the second. I'm gonna put him as second row cover. I do like having an actual second row on the bench. I think it does help. And then Botham Lawrence, Mould as the replacement scrum half, and then outside back wise, we've had this debate many times about what the cover actually is. It probably should be a winger, it should be Grace, but it just will be Jennings, because that just seems to be the way that Jockey likes to pick his bench. So it's not. I don't think it's worth having too much of a conversation over that, because it just will be him. So our team then starting 15 from front to back: Southworth, Belcher, Litterick, Teddy McNally, Mann, Young, and Falatau, Bevan and Sheedy, Thomas and Lilo, Millard, Hamer Webb and Winnett, and then the bench of Lloyd, Domachowski, Azarati, Thornton, Botham, Lawrence, Mulder and Jennings. I think that's a pretty solid 23, and one that can definitely get the job done on the weekend. Any other business? Any final thoughts from anybody in particular? All good. That's us then for this week. If you're heading out to Galway, however you're getting there on the weekend, have a good trip. If not, the the clubhouse will be showing it. So do get down there after you've been to Bridgend to watch the Rags batter Bridgend, of course, in the Ysposity derby. We'll be back next week. We'll be picking the bones out of the Connacht game and have Rags Corner, and hopefully we'll have a trip to France. I believe it's Racing or Perpignan await us if we do make it through to the next round. So fingers crossed we'll have that to look forward to. Otherwise, we'll just have a very short, very sad podcast talking about one game and then calling it a night. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next week.